Charlie Parr. Welcome to eTown. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to talk to you about those first two songs. Am I right that you did some work as either an advocate or involved with homeless communities in either Twin Cities or Duluth or wherever?
Both, yeah. I was an outreach worker. We had a small crew of 3, and we had I think it was a bread truck at one time. We converted it into a kind of a supply vehicle. We took out blankets, hot food, coffee, basic first aid supplies.
Right.
We contracted with the local Veterans Administration. 37% of our homeless population or more now are veterans, and we would help them get services. We helped. We took out resources, psychiatric resources. We took out nurses. Just anybody that would come and help us.
And did you do it long enough and in the same location often enough to where you get to know people's names and get to see the same folks? And
Definitely, yeah. We served between 400 and 500 people a day. Our only parameters, we were primarily serving people who were currently living out of doors, meaning that there was no more shelter space for them, so they were forced to live out. They were sleeping outside at night.
Yeah, and we're talking about Minnesota.
Yeah, and Duluth and Minneapolis, and they're both cold.
Yeah, they're both cold. Well, it's interesting because obviously one song was obviously about from the perspective of the person who's out on the street, and the other was about those who have extra, spreading it around. Did that occupy a lot of your time for a long time? That work?
It did. Yeah.
Was your gig?
Many years.
Yeah.
Through a move up to Duluth, and then we had a son, and I was gigging at night and trying to work during the day, and it was not working anymore, and so I took a hiatus, which I'm still on.
Yeah, and but those stories stay with you, and those connections and those relationships and the opportunity to develop both empathy and, to some extent, just frustration around the situation.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a bigger issue now than it was when you were doing this work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I quit in 1999 or 2000, and we had high hopes of reducing the issue by 10 or 20% in the next 5 or 10 years, and it went the opposite direction. I still have friends who are involved in the process, and I still do volunteer work myself and do fundraisers and stuff, so it's gotten much worse.
And those stories find their way into some of your songs.
It finds its way into everything that I do. It definitely affected me in profound ways.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit, just if you don't mind, because I know I mentioned earlier that your dad was sort of a pathway for you to discover and experience some of the country blues music that became the soundtrack to your life in a way. Mm-hmm. And when you were a kid, when you're hearing these songs and maybe stories from your dad's record collection and stuff, were there either guitar players or singers that spoke to you more than others? Did you find yourself on the guitar side leaning more towards the sort of Robert Johnson or Mississippi Fred McDowell or Son House, or were there people that you said, I want to play guitar like that guy?
My guy was Mance Lipscomb.
Mance Lipscomb. Yeah.
Dad had that Texas Songster LP, and I pretty much wore it flat. That's why I wanted to get a guitar when I was 8 years old, and I asked Dad if I could have a guitar, and I think he said nobody can play like Mance, and I went anyway. So he traded a Johnson 9.9 boat motor for a Gibson 12-string, which I was appalled because I did not want 12 strings. I only wanted 6 of them. But Dad said, that was the best trolling motor I've ever had. You'd better learn how to play that thing. So I took 6 of the strings off of it, and I sat in front of the stereo and listened to Mance Lipscomb and tried to play along.
Yeah. And wasn't Mance also like the main guy for Townes Van Zandt and Steve Earle and a bunch
He
of
was
those
a
Texas guys? He was like
yeah.
the Texas guy.
The other record my
Houston
dad
guy.
had that I loved was a solo Lightning Hopkins record called Blues in My Bottle. It was a solo acoustic Lightning record that I adored.
Yeah.
And later on, when I heard Lightning playing with a band, I did not like that nearly as much. So
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this also. When you're a teenager and now you're deep in and you've got your 12-string pared down to a 6 and you're learning all these songs, did you have anybody in your school class that actually understood what the heck you were up to? Or were they all listening to other stuff?
Well, no, there were people. Austin, Minnesota, where I grew up, had an amazing record collection in the public library, and they had what looked like a complete set of Folkways records, including the Harry Smith anthology. And so, and these were the days when you went to the library and there was a little card with people's names on it, and you could see. And Austin was not a big town, so you could see who was listening to the music you liked, and go find that person and say, buying Lemon Jefferson, and they would say, yeah. So.
I've never heard that before, but that's so obvious. That's so cool. I love that. Analog sleuthing. Mm-hmm. Find your people.
Yeah,
it makes a difference because, it doesn't take many. If you have one or two people who can share that obsession or that passion, it's really all it takes to keep it going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Quickly, before we get back to more songs, I want to ask you about, when did you start writing songs? How old were you when you did that?
I didn't start writing until my dad passed away in 1995. And prior to that, all I wanted to do was play and learn these old styles and learn these old songs. And Dad was instrumental in that, and come downstairs to my room and he would listen and sing along. And then when he passed away, the grief that I had about that was so profound. It was something that really, really caved my whole world in. And I found that I couldn't write about it. The grief counselor says, journal about it or whatever. And I wasn't comfortable with that. I ended up writing things that looked like songs. And so my first songs were all about the stories that my dad told me about his youth and trying to remember them. And songs are a good way to remember things. So songs are about my dad.
That's cool. That's very cool. And then what about writing a book? Is that something you'd always thought you would do? Because your book came out last year, and that's a big thing. Your debut novel.
I really enjoy writing. I'm halfway through the next one, but I don't write songs in kind of verses and choruses. What I do is I write little stories, and I distill those stories for songs. You got kind of melodies crawling around in your head, and you go through these stories, and you try to make a song out of that. So the first book was mostly short stories that were kind of alternate versions of songs that had been taken out of the stories, and then I just mined the rest of the stories for actual stories. And
Kerner, Ray, and Glover, they were a powerful influence in your world?
They still are. I moved from Austin to the Twin Cities in the early 80s. I dropped out of high school and found a room in Minneapolis, and Thursdays I would go down to Nicollet Avenue so I could see Dave Ray and Tony Glover play. Fridays I would get to the 400 bar so I could see Willie Murphy play barrel house piano in there, and then Sundays I would go see Spider John Kerner at the Viking Bar every week.
Yeah.
And
nobody at the Triangle?
The Triangle was closed by the time I got up there, and the Extempore was closed. So whenever you get anywhere, you just missed it.
Yeah, right.
Well,
it sounds like you didn't miss all of it.
I didn't, and I got to see the trio play on a number of occasions. They would do yearly shows and get together, and I got to see Dave Ray's last performance before he passed away. I got to become friends with Tony and John. And last year, John called me up and he said he couldn't play the guitar anymore, so he gave me his 12-string, which is being humidified in my closet right now because he did not humidify it.
Well, it's interesting. I know the Cactus Blossoms are from Minneapolis, and you know those guys, right? You've crossed paths there a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And both of you, as I was sort of alluding to in the beginning, absorbed these traditional sounds, these legends, this traditional music, and soaked it up, and honored that tradition, and still made it your own. New songs, new sounds. It's something you share, something you both share. Well, listen, I'm thrilled that you're here. Really glad that you made it to eTown, and we look forward to hearing more songs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Please welcome back, if you would, Charlie Parr.
Thank you.